Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me again today on debcourtney.com. I'm Deb Courtney and this is Your True Self. So really glad to have you with us because I've got another special guest, which is always exciting, and always these amazing women that are around us, surrounding us and helping us get through things. And one of those amazing ladies that has come into my life, and now I want you to see what she can do for you as well, is Fiona Nicholson. So welcome, Fiona. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Deb, for having me. It's a real honour to be able to speak to you today and to shoot the breeze over many topics.
I know. So when we're thinking about all these lovely women I've had on, so I've met you through our Creatrix and we got to share a room together. So we did find out a bit about each other a little bit more intimately, in the sense of, you know, you've got a shower, you've got to with these what seems like a total stranger, but it's amazing how quickly you can actually bond and form some amazing long-lasting friendships through that sort of situation. So there you are, sharing a room with someone you've never known, and now 2 years down the track, look at us.
Yeah,
right? We've even decided to wear the same colour. We're so
I know, unplanned. I did have an intuitive hit and I was like, I think Deb will be in blue. And then I was like, should I change it? And I was like, nah, we'll be right.
It sets the tone gorgeously. So I've asked you on because as we've, gotten to know each other, and it was an interesting finding out a bit about you while we were sharing our room. And we know that we're on a very similar, mindset and path, in that we want to help lots and lots of women. But you've got a background as well in teaching. So, I've got my nursing background, you've got your teaching background, and you've really adapted that into what you're doing now, and how you've also been able to combine, stepping out of what seemed to be, normal or expected from a teacher, and you're doing something a bit different, and how you even got out there, because sometimes we've got to get past our fears and beliefs. So how you even do that in the first place.
Yes, well, I do definitely have experience as a qualified teacher. Originally, I actually took it on as my plan B, interestingly. So as an adult, that was my perspective. This was my plan B, so I could have children. And at the time when I was making this decision, I moved away from what I had started, which was commerce and accounting. I finished my commerce and accounting degree and decided that it was really important, if I was going to have children, to be available to them whilst still generating an income, because I wanted to be a present parent. And so that was the intention, that I kind of did my extra studies in teaching and got into public education, as well as some moral value and ethics that I had at the time, a much younger version of myself. And so over 20-something years, over 25 years now, I've been qualified, predominantly working in the New South Wales public education sector, but with international experience in foreign languages, learning and teaching overseas in both languages, in English, and then learning other languages myself. Yeah. And working as well in the cruise industry, I was able to use a little bit of my education. My education background actually got me into the cruise industry. So a lot of people don't know that about me, actually. I spent a few years on the high seas.
You look a little bit like Julie from The Love Boat, doesn't she have the wavy hair?
Yes. Now, look, funny you should mention her, because that's actually one of the ships that I worked on. It was the original Love Boat. That ship. Yeah, I didn't realize when I was first on board, but that was actually the Love Boat, and it had been repurposed down into the South Pacific. Yeah. And so it was that was a very interesting time period in my life, certainly. But being an educator came into opening some of those channels. But like with many things, you did mention in our lead-in about facing fears and making decisions about things that you might not normally do. And that's a perfect example of when I did do something that was not normal. I was, at that time, there had been some complications in my home situation, and we can go into that a little bit more if you like. But I had recently separated from my husband, and I had been in the corporate sector for 3 or 4 years, and I had made a decision to leave that role because I felt that my attention was required at home. And within 2 weeks of making that decision to resign a very lovely role and income, I found myself standing in a quagmire of, I suppose it was torment at the time, to be honest, but and where my whole world turned upside down. And that seems to be a common feature in my life, is it literally turning upside down. And so I went back into teaching as a casual teacher, and secured some roles at a school that actually became a part of my journey through the cruise industry, because when I wasn't on the cruise ships, I was back here teaching.
Okay.
And it was a very interesting time, because what had happened was I had decided after that relationship ending that I would travel and work overseas, and I was planning to teach overseas. And what actually transpired was that some offers came through that I was never made aware of, because my mail went missing.
Oh.
And by the time I realized what was going on, those offers had closed, but an opportunity to apply for a role in Japan came up. So I took the opportunity to apply, actually for the second time. So this is an interesting story. Not a lot of people know. I had worked in the corporate sector. I had left that role, and prior to taking on that role, I actually was invited to take on that teaching role in Japan. And I had a choice at that time. It was a bit like the yellow brick road, I was at the Y in the road, and I had the choice of staying local with contract or going overseas. And at that point in time, my intuition, it played a part in my role up to there, in my life up to there, but I think that I wasn't as keenly tuned or attuned to it as I became later.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of made a decision that altered the course of my life, and I chose to stay and take the contract because I wanted to be in the relationship that I was in. So I chose to stay local to continue in that relationship, because I knew if I left that relationship would end, and I didn't want it to. So I stayed. So then fast forward to when that relationship was no longer in place, and I, in some weird aspect of the universe, found myself in exactly the same position. I got offered a renewed contract at my old employer in a similar role to what I was doing, and I had the opportunity to go to Japan. And I was like, you don't need to tell me twice. Like, I took that one last time. I'll go to Japan.
Yeah, I'm listening. I'm listening.
Yeah, right. And my sum total of knowledge of Japan was, my dad had traveled there, and he had done some work. He was in the freight industry and customs industry. And I had a Japanese traditional doll and a little bathrobe kimono that he had brought back. And that was it. So I decided to go. And I didn't know the language. I fortunately chose an employer that was very supportive of bringing Gaijin into the country to teach English for their immersive studies.
Mm-hmm.
And so people were like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm moving to Japan. They're like, hold on, what? Do you know the language? No. Have you been there before? No. Have you been overseas? I went to Fiji for 2 weeks. And a lot of people were very shocked at my decision to go, but it just felt right for me.
Yeah. So that was before Creatrix. So what do you
Definitely
think really, because that can be quite a fear, and I know some people are likely to do that and others not. What was there a fear, and if there was, what did you actually do to get over that, to just go, I'm going to bite the bullet and I'm going to do it? Or did you just literally go, I'm going to bite the bullet?
Oh, no. Yep. Just go with that intuitive knowing that was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Was trusting my gut, which that's something that a lot of women struggle to actually do, is to connect in and trust their gut. And I think that's something that, even though, I had my own health compromises, which I wasn't aware of at that time, when you get that overarching sense of this is the right thing, but you can't see what it's going to produce. I think it's literally having blind faith to a degree that this will be the right thing. And aside from the fact that it was exciting, it was different, it was freeing, there was all these things that it was going to be. And I didn't have to worry about income because I was going to work. And that was something that stayed in my experience for traveling. You know, I've been to over 50 countries around the world now, and it has always been through work. I think, I think last time I traveled, a couple of years back, actually, about 2015 was the first time I traveled just to go internationally on a holiday to Thailand.
And then on the same note, like you've left a husband. How did that, how did that come about, and how did you overcome that? Because that's a really, really big step to take for some people.
Yep, that was probably one of the most challenging situations I found myself in my entire life, actually. And so there was infidelity in the relationship. And at that time, I was really, what got me caught up was actually because I'd made this commitment. And this is where my struggle was in that I had made a commitment, and by leaving, I would be breaking that commitment. So I had this real mental struggle about this, and I actually had to seek some assistance with the pastor that had married us and speak to him about it to get, you know, my ethical balance on this question, because I really was of the opinion that I'd signed up for better or worse, and this was worse. Yeah. And it was not in my nature to just drop out because something got a bit hard. That's not how I tend to roll. And this got hard, really hard, devastatingly hard. And so I actually sought some counsel from him, and he was very good, because he was like, no, the agreement that you two made has been broken. So you are not liable under that agreement in the eyes of God or the world in that regard, to sustain and stay in and to fix this, because this was not your actions. So with that sort of ammunition, I was like, okay. And I suppose this comes back to blind faith is a little bit of a theme in my life, I've noticed. And it came back to the point where I'd returned to the house and we were having a conversation around whether this could work at all. We tried in a very short time frame to make it work, and it still wasn't. And there was a lot of water under the bridge at that point. And to be, just for backstory, you know, we had been together for I think 11 or 12 years by that stage. So it wasn't, you know, just a few years relationship in and out. Yeah. And this was somebody that I'd chosen to spend time with for a long time. Mm. And I remember it getting to the point where I knew, because of there was a certain amount of toxicity in this relationship, and there was a certain amount of narcissism that I now understand I was experiencing. And I think that I knew at that point it was important that I didn't make the decision to go. And this was something that I really struggled with. And I remember putting my point forward and asking the question, so what are you going to do? I just removed it off my area of responsibility. And that was terrifying, because he could have said, stay. And I would have been in a situation where I had to then think, okay, is that what I want? So I really pushed the opportunity for him to make a choice, because my thinking at that time was I did not want to be the party responsible and having that eternal blame that, oh, you left me, that victim mentality. And I really did trust the universe and have some faith that if I was meant to be in that relationship, then the choice would be stay. But I've never felt so panicked and terrified in my life, sitting on that lounge waiting to hear, and it felt like an eternity. It felt like forever for him to say, no, I'm going to go. I'm not staying. But the funniest thing, look, in tragedy, there's always laughter, right? There's always comedy, because he made his decision after all of this toing and froing, and turned around and looked at me and said, so when are you going to leave? And I said, leave? You're choosing to go? And he said, yeah, but when are you going to leave the apartment? I looked at him, I just laughed. I said, oh, buddy, I'm not, you are. You've got 2 hours. So I sort of stood in my power at that point, you know. And look, you know, things went along as they do and other experiences happen. But that moment of giving in to a power greater than myself and just trusting that the right outcome would come out of it was that was scary. That was, even just talking to you now, you know, we talk about fear. I can feel that tension. It's not like constricting me, but I can feel that in my body. And as we know, our bodies hold our memories quite vividly. So this is something that I love about Creatrix. We don't have to sit in that stuff, you know.
Anymore. No. And that's the thing. We relive everything, because every time we think about it, as women, we internalize it and emotionalize it. So our bodies are going through as though it was just happening to us right now. It's going through it again every time we kind of think about it, until we can change that and flip that around and kind of still have the memory but not have the emotion that's connected to it.
Yeah, and release that somatic memory out of the muscles and out of the physical body is so important, you know, and that's something that I think we both, being Creatrix transformologists, we both can see that physically happening sometimes with our clients. We can see a physical response when that emotion is released. It's like quite amazing.
Green Mile, you know, in the movie The Green Mile. It's funny, that movie's come up twice today. When I was talking to some students about that time that they put, you know, was sentencing him to death and they didn't wet the sponge.
I haven't seen it, to be honest.
Haven't you? Oh
no.
A little bit disturbing in some ways, but
yeah.
At the end, towards the end, where one of them is spewing out this stuff, and to me, sometimes that's what it's like when you're watching someone go through this transformation. It's like, blah, they're getting rid of this, and then they're released.
Yep.
And there's that. Oh, I needed that to come out.
Yeah, the whole body sort of relaxing. You can just, you know, and it's different for everybody. I think that we need to be really clear about that, because we're so individual. Every single person, every single woman is so individual biochemically, and so we all have different ways we trap it and different ways we let it out. You know, it's quite an amazing thing to witness.
Yeah, you can watch some people, like one of my clients, it was the yawn, always yawning, like all the way through the release. It was, you know, constantly yawning, but it was like that's releasing it out. You know, someone else might do something else, but yeah, it's interesting.
I'm a total yawner. I yawn all the time,
and I can't even mention the
like I'm going to fall asleep, but I'm not.
Yeah, so you've managed to get away, which is quite significant. And people find that a huge challenge, to be able to do that and then get stuck there. So you know, finding that intuition and really, really trying to tap into it and acknowledge it.
Yes.
A good leading way, but it can be scary and confronting.
Yeah, and I think something that just happened recently in the last 12 months as well, with, you know, having Creatrix regularly and delayering through other things that I also use. This last 12 months brought me to the point where I was able to realize that in relation to that situation, I was still existing. And this is like, what's the year now? 21. This is over 20 years ago. Like, this is long held. And I was still existing in victim mode in relation to that situation. Like, I don't carry myself as a victim in the way I interact with the world at large. But in this situation, it was still all his fault. And I got some learning through some study that I was doing as to my role as a woman in terms of relationship. And it was really interesting. It was very humbling. Oh my gosh, it was very humbling to learn this sort of new information, because it put me in the position where I had to acknowledge my role in the deterioration of the relationship, not as a direct reflection, but looking at what women and men specifically need in their lives because of their natural separateness. You know, women and men are built so uniquely and differently, And that's why Creatrix is for women. It is designed for women, right? So having this new knowledge made me have to sit in that for a while and take some accountability. And I had to actually reach out and contact my ex-husband, and I wanted to take responsibility for some aspects of what had transpired in the years prior to that. And it was a very interesting experience because, you know, hindsight 2020, that's so great. But it gave an opportunity for him to also respond and to make some statements about where he and I were both at. And we were very young too. We were together from teenage years. So we kind of grew up together and supported each other the best way that we knew how, given we weren't shown, you know, things. And I think that actually stems from one of the things that we might talk about a little bit is, you know, my father died when I was a teenager. So I was a particularly grief-driven individual that I didn't even realize how much grief I was carrying until my first Creatrix experience. It was astounding. I had been in grief for the majority of my life. Prior to even him passing away, I had grief from other situations. And so my first Creatrix experience was in releasing grief. Wow. And it changed me. Like, it changed me to a different person. And I'm not even that person today that was, you know, 7 years ago. Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, I know working with someone who was had been in guilt mode for probably 20 odd years or more, maybe more, in relation to the family suicide, sibling suicide, and carrying that for so long. And then finally, it wasn't the easiest one, but to release that was just amazingly liberating. So that kind of, that same with the grief thing, must feel like the whole burden all had been lifted or lightened the load.
But the thing about it was that I found spectacular was I had not realised until the pre-work that we need to do in order to facilitate Creatrix. I had not realised personally that I was in grief. I didn't know it.
It's hard, isn't it, though, when you're looking at yourself? It's like getting feedback from outside people. They see something different in us than we do. And when we're in that mode, it's you've got to step away from yourself to look back in. But that's why, you know, being your own counsellor is not going to be most effective, because you're not going to, unless you're really ready to see everything very clearly or even take on your own crap, you're not going to be able to address it yourself. You really do need that facilitating role to progress through.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for women to understand it is really hard for self to not just observe, but for self to analyse self. We've got, our brains are so clever. Our ego brain is so clever at putting things so that it all seems okay, you know, for that survival mode mechanism to be so strong. And it's not till you have other people looking at what you're doing. And even today, like, you know, I use Creatrix regularly, but there's still situations where my friends go, that's not being vulnerable, or you being authentic there. And they, you know, and I'm like, yes, I am. And then I look and I think, oh, cause for pondering, why are they saying that? And having a look and then going, oh, look, that's interesting. That's moved its way up. And
maybe they've seen something I haven't.
Yes.
That's true. So so you've gone from there and you've actually just recently moved as well, haven't you? So that's another big thing.
I think that's the 26th time in my life that I've moved. So I was thinking about that the other day, actually, because I have just I made the decision to move for me this time rather than for work. It's the first time in my life that, you know, I sort of was alluding to earlier. Because I want to create a life where I'm really happy and I don't have to run away on a vacation to be feeling good. You know, I want to live in a space where work is not my 24/7 driver. You know, I want to have all of these elements to my life. So I'm really consciously moving about setting things up and putting structures in place for that to be the case. So, but yes, I had to do a calculation. it was last year, I think it was. I think this will be my 25th or 26th move in my lifetime. So it is. And I never realized, and the stress that goes with that, you start to look at some of the things that you do. And we're talking about earlier, me relying on a bit of blind faith with some things, but at the same time, there are certain things that I've found that I've done throughout my whole life that are repeated patterns that I have had as a survival mechanism, and not staying too long in one place was a very good, ego brain way of me not having to face healing and wounds that existed.
Yep.
So it was an interesting observation. And when I sort of took charge of that probably 2.5 years ago now, I was like, oh, okay. So this is why we get to 2 years and we move. So it was very eye-opening to see the pattern and be able to do something about it.
Yeah, that's good. So you're glad to be where you are?
Love it. Love it. The beach is only 1 kilometre away. I have access to sunshine, rain. It's a bit cool. It's not Canberra cold, less Canberra. That's where I just moved from. So this coastal area is definitely warmer. I grew up on the coast. So for me, it's been very much about coming home to a safe space that is now safe because I've done the work on myself. So I'm not having to run away from the beach. And it's great. So plenty of vitamin D. Love that. Yeah. Plenty of grounding opportunities, plenty of really, really good sort of karmic energy around the space and the place, a fabulous apartment, amazing neighbours. I don't know how I've manifested that, but I have. So I'm really, really happy. It's hard to do in lockdown though. We are in lockdown. So it's been interesting observing, normally when you move somewhere, creating social networks, when you don't have, so I don't have children. And so I don't have that connection to schools in that way of a parent. Yeah. And therefore social networks. So it's been very interesting moving basically just before isolation and lockdown, whatever they're calling it these days, and not being able to formulate and extend social networks in the way that you would normally. So I've had to think sort of creatively around, that, but also to take this time to internalize and to make sure that I am maintaining my personal calm and not sinking into the fear that is existing around on televisions and that people are espousing everywhere. So it's been a very interesting time period to relocate, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And so what are you doing now with your teaching? Like you've expanded out and you're doing some extra stuff.
I do lots of stuff. I do lots of stuff, Deb.
That's all we do. We don't ever seem to just, do one thing.
Yeah, that's right. So I have done this for a little while, but I formalized it the other week because I just got to the point where I was like, plan B is done. And I decided that so a couple of things happened with plan B being done. I've never had to worry about picking up casual temp or contract work with teaching. It's been something like I'm a professional. I walk in, I get jobs, and then schools don't let me go. So this has been my not existence, but part of, I was permanent as well for people that understand the differences. But so I've never been in a position where I haven't had work.
Yeah.
And moving up here is the first time in my life that I suppose struggled, but my care factor was different. So it wasn't really a struggle, but it's where I observed that I wasn't picking up work like that. And so that led me to really revisit my decisions about wanting to get out of the system. I had resigned my permanency a couple of years earlier as a result of a medical injury, not to do with work, but it stopped me working full time.
Yeah.
And so I looked at what I want to do and what I enjoy, and I was not enjoying, especially the last few years of education. I wasn't enjoying some of the ways we're indoctrinating our youth, and I wasn't enjoying some of the highly administrative ways that we were being required to educate. And I wasn't enjoying that. I wasn't surrounded by like-minded people. And so I felt quite stifled by the whole situation. So I knew I had to do something about it. So what I've done is gone back to I love working with people for learning. I have my teaching qualifications. I also worked in adult education, so in sort of systems training and rollouts and things. So I've worked with people from an educational perspective from, I think my youngest student ever was 18 months. And I think my oldest is somewhere in their 70s, across a wide range of content area. So teaching is something that I'm really good at. So what I did was formalized all my sort of teaching and created a tutoring business. So I'm sort of launching that in this new space and looking at how I can facilitate learning beyond academic learning for the purposes of passing exams, and looking holistically at the children and the family that they come from, and working in a way that really dives into their skill sets that they can drive and dive down into their internal self. And I think, the name of your business, but your podcast, Your True Self, that's something that I really resonate with. And that's what I unconsciously have been trying to do in my education work for a number of years. And when I realized that this week, it's really about working with the child or the student, whichever their age, to really focus in on what's in you.
Yeah.
I know you want to be able to pass a test, but what's in you that you're going to bring to our community in the future? What's your passion? What's your thing that drives you and excites you and that you want to know about? Because prescriptive learning can be such a killer to a passion and love for learning new things throughout life.
Yeah.
And people's experiences at schools can be very negative. Not only in the way the system's set up, but in the way that the social relationships have been reinforced over time. And so I want to get away from that, because I think it's really important for young people to have the freedom to explore who they really are, so that they're not turning up as our age needing release from all this stuff that's been layered, So that's what I'm doing with that.
Yeah. And schooling can be sometimes the most traumatic time in a person's life.
Yeah. I think I was the one that, I poured myself into my schooling to be a good girl, even though I like to buck the system and I like to challenge the status quo. So I used to be in hot water constantly, because I would sort of a foot in both camps. And I didn't have, I'm very tall in stature and I'm very broad. So I didn't ever have that situation where somebody was going to pick on me physically or mentally. I rolled in the crowd. I suppose you'd call us the nerds, really. But I went to an all-girls school, and we just growing up, we traveled through as a cohort of very intelligent women or girls at the time. And it was interesting because I always felt really dumb, really dumb compared to my peers. And I just sort of laugh at that now, because I have multiple degrees and master's levels of degree. So it was, but I do recall situations where, things like bullying took place. And I think sort of about how if people were secure in who they were and they didn't have this victim mentality, then that would pretty much cease to exist. So that's something that, when working with children is really an area that I try and focus on, is like, well, how do you get out of that victim mentality? Because that's often energetically what draws situations to people.
Yeah. And then, looking at the victim mentality, and then why is the bully doing the bullying in the first place? And there's usually a self-worth and all that goes with it.
Yeah, it's a cliche, but it's true, right? It's the hurt people.
Yeah, yeah.
know, and it's lack of understanding and awareness. People, you know, some of the people that are hurting people don't actually know that that's not right. It's like, I don't mean right in a right and wrong, but they don't know any different, you know, because that's their experience. They're literally reliving and repeating their paternal or maternal pattern that they've experienced growing up, and so they're doing the same thing. You know, it's very interesting. So I think that's one of the things that I've always tried to bring to certainly my education background is how to bring people out of what they know, as a bit of an agent of change and for change, and to expose them to things they might not have considered or ways of thinking that they may never have heard. And that's why, you know, as a teacher, I was predominantly in high school. A lot of people wouldn't go near it with a barge pole, but I really enjoyed challenging students to tackle their ideas and understand whether it was their idea or whether they were actually just spouting their parents' ideas. And for so many of us, that's what we do because that's what we learned.
Yeah, yeah. And we usually feel that we can trust our parents with whatever they're saying. And most parents do want the best for their children, most. Not there's always a small minority but yeah, that's a good
I think, look, even with those people, I know people do some horrible things, but I think even those people in their truest heart, they actually don't want to harm. You know, there's a very small percentage of the population that are in a whatever category they call that. But I think that as people delayer and they get into their truer self, their authentic self, not their injured child, wounded child, not their, you know, distraught wife, like whatever their different archetypes are. Yeah, I think that, you know, if we can operate, and I think it's really important right now, if we can focus on operating from a space of universal love and to be aware that we all have differences of opinion, of experience, of knowledge. But as one human race, if we can operate each of us from universal love and not be divided, then we're going to end up in a much better situation than we find ourselves currently, you know. I think helping people to uncover and to tap down into that core love self-being is something that I really like doing. And that's part of my role as working with women is, you know, I work with women because they have a direct impact on children.
Yeah, and that's true. Absolutely. Totally correct. Yeah. How we feel and how, you know, in a household and as a mum, you know that how you're feeling directly impacts the energy of the household as well.
Yep. And it's amazing how many women's cycles impact them and therefore their household.
Yeah. And so then, you know, being in touch with our own self, like, sorry for all the vegetarians out there, but the other day, like I just knew I needed some red meat. I just decided I needed it, and then whammo, you go, oh, that's why I needed it. Because there's something saying you need that right now. You need that for your body, for your system and your energy and all that. So yeah.
I think that's really important too. I had an opportunity to speak on stage in the US a couple of years ago, and it's something that I do say quite frequently, and it's that idea of like, what are you consuming? You know, what are you consuming? And we're talking about food right now, but we're not when we ask that question. We're asking, what are you consuming, like visually? What are you consuming physically? And what are you taking in? Like, if you break it down to what are you taking into your body, mind, and spirit, and is that serving you? You know, and there is a large push, you know, for different types of food diets and things like this. But if we actually start to tap into what our body needs, it's very intelligent, those trillions of cells that we have, and it can tell us when we need certain things. You know, it can tell us when we crave certain types of vegetables. That's because there's a component of those vegetables, whether it's a mineral, a trace element, whatever, in them that our body requires. So tapping into that really intuitive learning or knowing about oneself, you know, is really important.
Yeah, and I know that I love the idea of perhaps eating things that aren't. And I had a conversation with Natalie on here a while back, and she is, well, in fact, I think she's vegan. So, but you also then have to be aware because there is a big push at the moment for all these non-meat burger patty or substitute. What's being used in that to actually make the substitute? Is that actually worse than what we're eating? And so, I have one son that's sort of pescatarian. I don't even know if he's really that, because he doesn't really love fish. But I'm trying to, when you don't have a broad range of food over palate, I'm like, well, you need to at least eat some form of protein, because we really need protein in some way. And so unless you're going to eat the legumes and all of that actually can provide it, I need something for you to consume. And I was buying some of that stuff, and I thought, actually, what is in that eating? And it's beneficial, and quite often it's not. I was going down a different stream there, and I forgot what I was really going down.
That's right. But what I wanted to address while you were talking about that is, so my more natural health journey started back in 2015, and I knew prior to that, well, actually probably started longer than that ago, because, I was still actually married when I first found out that I had some food intolerances and some situations going on that I'm still working on repairing today. But certainly 2015 was a big year for me, because I really had to step into looking at a lot of things. I was very unhealthy. I had a chronic injury, and there's more to that backstory we can discuss if you want, but it got me to the point in the last 2 years where I had to start reading labels. And once I started reading labels, it's that idea of, what are you consuming? Like, what does that actually mean? And so now I don't, it's very rare that I have anything that's from a packet. It's very rare. I'm a meat and vegetables and salad, like just actual foods. I'm not a huge, I'm not a small meat eater, but I'm not a everyday meat eater, because I think there's some validity in the way you do feed yourself and your family in terms of moving across a number of different types of proteins, whether they be vegetable or meat based. But one of the things that I noticed probably last year when I really tried to grow, I do have to be grain free at this point, was how much stuff is in what looks like healthy alternatives in terms of some of the vegan food that are on the shelves in packets, and even natural flavors. Like, people think, natural flavors are, they're natural flavors. They're so chemical. They're so chemical, and people have got this false sense of awareness around that they are safe. And I think that's something else that, this is part of my journey going forward, is understanding, if it is chemical, it's probably not meant to be in your body. It's probably not on your body. We digest so much through our skin, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. And that's why I don't use anything chemical on my skin. It's all, organic stuff and no chemicals that are, because it's our obvious.
I suppose just there. I think it's probably important to clarify. We're talking about synthetic chemicals there, because you always get somebody who goes, well, chemicals are everywhere. That's that you're made up of chemicals, and they do that. And we get it. But we're really talking about the synthetic or produced chemicals that are not naturally occurring in the environment. When we say that. And the other thing I think people don't realize, Deb, I find this when I found this out, I was so shocked. I was next level. But once items are under a certain percentage or proportion on the ingredients list in Australia, they don't have to be listed. So there are neurotoxins and heavy metals and all sorts of things in different products, including some sunscreens and all sorts of stuff that, I question why they're even there.
And the other thing is, they actually don't, they can actually have like a trade secret or a formulation secret.
Proprietary formulation.
And that could be highly toxic, but they don't have to label it, because it's a bit like a lot of perfumes. There's a lot of other things out there as well that are like that. but they don't have to list it because they can say it's under their formulation secret. And so, well, if it's secret, you know, so I think there's a problem. And it's often a secret that they don't want to tell.
Yes. And I'm glad you brought up perfume, because it's just such a, like, as women, we're so programmed about fragrance and smell and around not having a natural pheromone-based smell. Like it actually is a cause for concern, I think, with the amount of products young women and girls are spraying under their arms, on their bodies, putting on their faces, you know, and
in their, you know, nodes, their lymph node area.
Yep, lymph node areas.
Perfume can have up to 3,000 chemicals in it.
Yeah. And, you know, look, I mean, the thing that concerns me particularly, because, you know, our external skin is still really sensitive, but if we start to go into sort of some of our more private areas, we certainly have much more absorptive power. And so some of the products coming onto the market claiming, you know, to assist with female freshness and hygiene, like, and even for babies in diapers, you know, like if you think about if you have young girls and you're putting nappies on them with lots of chemicals in the nappy and on the nappy, and then that's going up against their bottom or their vagina, like, or not their vagina, labia, it'd be a bit awkward. But what, that's really absorptive tissue of the skin there. So what's that child taking in that could be an endocrine disruptor or things like that? Like, I really do think about these things, because I think that people it worries me that people don't have an awareness around some of these things, you know, and things that you wouldn't think at first would be important. Like, why would you think a diaper or a nappy would ever be, or a feminine hygiene product? You know, you wouldn't think that something like that would be toxic, but it can be. So why
we know one of the companies was knowingly putting asbestos in their talcum powder, and where do we put it? And we know, like, as from the medical industry, we use medications sublingually under the tongue and around, because we know in the mucosal membranes it gets absorbed very quickly. The difference is when we absorb things through our skin, you know, if we digest it, it goes through quite a process of filtration, but when we put something on our skin, it's going directly into the bloodstream, because you don't have a liver and a kidneys and that and a gastric that, you know, helps filter some of that bad stuff out. When it's in the skin, it goes before it enters the blood, but on the skin it goes really straight to the blood.
Straight in, direct absorption. And people, they don't realize that, you know, and that's something that I think everybody should be aware of. Like, when you put it on your skin, it's going into your bloodstream. No processing, no, nothing to stop it being in its crude form, you know. Which, look, at the same time, that can be beneficial when you're using natural products that can support your health and wellness, you know. So that's, I mean, I use essential oils myself, therapeutic grade essential oils. So for me, that knowing that and being able to utilize that to my advantage for my, you know, body support and repair is really helpful, you know. So I've been able to switch that, actually, and I mentioned about coming a few years back about moving towards more natural solutions. So it's one aspect of the more natural way that I try to utilize natural products. But having said that, even in the industry of essential oils, you know, unless they are pure grade, then they can be filled with all sorts of fillers, and that's basically an unregulated, at this point in time anyway, an unregulated market. So they don't have to list any fillers, any of the essential oil companies, which is why it's really important, I think, if you're going to go down a natural path, that you have some ability to see what's in your products, whether it's through chromospectrography, all that sort of stuff, you know, if they've been tested for their actual purity.
Yeah, right.
I think that's really important, because you can find yourself, you know, using stuff that might have fillers in it and you're totally unknowing about it. So I think, you know, it's always buyer beware, of course, you know, do research.
There's an app called Chemical Maze that I use sometimes, especially if you're out food shopping or looking at some of your skincare products, because the beauty industry is actually fully self-regulated.
Yeah.
So who's going to call them out if they're self-regulated?
Yeah. But even in
out.
Yeah, and it's the same in you know, big ag. They've got so many names for fructose and corn syrup and, you know, GMO corn-based products or oils or all that sort of stuff, you know. Any of that stuff with, you know, people can do their research, but any of that stuff that's got the glyphosate in it as a stimulant to stopping, I don't know how to exactly word that, but to stopping the natural growth of the product itself and self-regulating weed invasion and stuff like that, you know. It's a little, it's definitely concerning, I think. I think a lot of people are not aware of the depths of what is in their food, in their products that they use for their skin, even sometimes to the point of what they're lying on, you know, with foams and other what can be quite toxic materials, you know, for anywhere from 4 to 12 hours of sleep a night, and you're lying on something that's actually, you know, allowing your skin to absorb up different chemicals. So even that awareness, you know, people just that they don't really think about that. So hopefully if you're listening, you know, take a time to audit. Yeah.
Unfortunately, not everyone, you know, we love people, we love helping people, but not everyone has that same thought process. And you know, when you are caring people, you can't imagine that someone else wouldn't be that way. So why would they do stuff that would hurt us? Well, you know, the good almighty dollar can be a very nice little carrot to be dangling over you to make. So sometimes,
and I think marketing's got a lot to do with that. You know, I sort of did a commerce degree, so sort of economics and accounting's in there, and a little bit of marketing and things. And some of the furfies that we as the general public over time have been educated into accepting. You know, I mean, just for the viewer, they can go back and look up the history of margarine and what its original intention was, you know, was not to be a food source for humans. You know, even cornflakes, you know, the breakfast cereal, not the brand, but the breakfast cereal has its own backstory that we've been marketed very well to taking that on board. There's so many things that are in our general consumption that were never intended as a human consumption item, you know, and they're usually they're featured in, you know, business marketing history sort of things. So go and Google some stuff, or not Google, but just get on the web and
DuckDuckGo it.
Whichever, something that's I mean, there's many browsers available.
But that's, you know, and I think that's the other important thing is when we're talking about that, and why is it important is because it's also related to ourselves and our own mental health, and we know our mental health can then affect our self-worth and how we live our life and that. So that is actually one of the big things, is if we're looking about what we are consuming and what's entering the gut, what's entering the bloodstream, that can actually have an impact on our mental health. And that's so, you know, it is a big problem at the moment. So what are some of the small things that we can actually do to help, you know, try and get us into that peak area of mental health? And it's sometimes just small steps, and you can't beat yourself up that, oh my God, look what I've been doing all this time. I've been consuming all that. And then it becomes almost overwhelming. Time and changing little steps in life, like that, you know, what you are consuming, and it's just a good start. It's a good start somewhere.
I think it's really important for mums to just take those small steps for themselves and not try and change their whole household at once, but to take small steps that they can keep longer term. You know, starting by looking at what are you eating and what's in it, you know. And I know you just started to, we're talking about this sort of gut-brain connection and mental health, you know, like I know from my own experience, like when I start to eat food that labors my digestive processes and certain types of food, I can see the relationship to my actual mental health and my level of vibration, because it doesn't take long for me to start feeling sad more frequently. And that's not my normal MO. So as soon as I've been sad for a couple of days, I'm like, hold on, what's going on here? Like I've done enough learning now that I can see some of the signs, when I observe what I'm doing. But I think for a lot of people, even just doing that, like observe how you feel and how long you feel it for after eating something. If potatoes make you feel heavy and sluggish, then maybe look at the frequency or the type of potato. I'm talking about white potatoes, that you consume, and maybe space it out and start to do some self-isolating tests with your own consumption. Look at what is the impact that the food that I'm eating is having on me, and go from that point, and make it easy on yourself. Like you said, you don't want to stress yourself trying to change everything at once. And for so many women, especially professional business women that are not at home, they're juggling the full-time role of managing the house most of the time, the children, then their business or profession. So even though they might have support from their partner or from, paid services, that's still sitting well and truly on their shoulders. And that's part of being a woman, where the nurturing, caretaking, it's in our DNA to be that role, which is quite different to men, actually. So, the men are really about providing and meeting needs, so you might think, your husband's or your partner's, so focused on work, and why can't he be at home with the kids? Well, that's because he's made to provide, and he sees providing as getting income so that stuff can happen in the home. And I think it's really important to just, like you said, small steps. And whether you have kids or not, actually, I just do small steps for myself, and become observant to your reactions, so that you can actually start to change it into not being reactions, but being responses. So if a food type is not working well with you and you're noticing that it drags you down, limit or remove, and then see how you are, and then reintroduce and see if it starts happening again. And then if it does, well, your body's smart. It's probably a reason that you don't want to have it at this point in time. You don't have to cut it forever usually, but because your body will self-repair. Like, it's an amazing, I don't want to say machine.
Well, it's amazing. We are absolutely amazing, and I've said that to my students this morning. We are like better than any computer out there. We are, our ability to compensate and try and find its homeostasis and that it's phenomenal. Like, and to allow it to do that, and to be able to nourish it to do that, so it can function.
I think you've just said a really important word there too, is allow. Like, allow your body to do its work. It doesn't need you to think about everything all the time. Your body is actually on automatic. And actually, I think the more we look at it, the more you think about something, the more interference you create in your natural body systems. And sometimes that interference can be positive, in terms of meditation and stuff like that. But your body is innately intelligent in its organic biochemical makeup, and is designed to be whole and complete and well, and to repair itself when there is something that is out of or not in ease. I think people need to just take that on board a little bit more, and allow their bodies to do the healing, and to uncondition themselves, I think, from the environment that we find ourselves in. That's like this, our capitalist society that we're sort of being bred into and looking at is so, drive, push, and then you pair it with food that's not actually supporting wellness and health. And then this is part of the reason we have so many women with autoimmune and chronic dis-ease in their bodies, is because there's no space for the body to do its healing and repairing. you know, wasn't made at the time when it was needed. And so things snowball, you know, bigger and bigger. And then you end up in these situations where the only solution might seem to be, you know, invasive practices or surgeries or chemical, you know, pharmaceutical dependence and stuff like that. And there is a way for people to explore, you know, don't get me wrong, emergency medicine, absolutely valid, needed, part of our society, part of the development of our society. But I think there's a lot that can be done stepping back to just grassroots of personal time and allowing yourself to heal and regenerate daily. You know, sleep is so important.
Yeah, taking control of your personal well-being.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's a massive thing, owning your own wellness.
Yeah.
Being in charge of you.
Well, and so being able to influence children, you know, in a positive way like that and taking that on board, that sounds amazing. And so you'll be doing tutoring.
Yeah, so I do small group and one-to-ones in that environment. It's not just children, you know, I have the opportunity to work with young adults as well in university, or students that are academic minded. So those looking to do HSC and VCE and that kind of attainment. So I have a really, with my background and experience, it's so broad, you know, that I can work with a lot of people because I'm working to find the good in them and to harness that. So that's something. And yeah, I've had a number of years of success in my workplace. So just bringing that across into this sort of environment. So that's definitely something that I'm just keen to see how that really forms here. And once we're out of lockdown, it'll be a little bit easier, I think. But, you know, I've worked in digital education as well. I've written programs and adapted and introduced and implemented curriculum as well. So I really do have a broad range of experience in that regard. So I'm just enjoying putting that to use in a way that is empowering an individual rather than the system.
Yeah. And fairly new as well, I can see.
Yeah. Because I think kids are amazing. Kids are amazing. When people are learning, they're amazing because it's just watching that penny drop moment or that time where they suddenly go, well, why am I doing, oh, what? Huh? And just being a part, I'm quite honored to be able to share those moments of really new experience, you know? Definitely something that brings me great joy and satisfaction in my life. And I think also, you know, I don't have my own children, so I don't really ever get tired of kids. That sounds terrible, but you know, sometimes as a parent, people are like, oh, I love my kids, but goodness, you know, I don't need somebody else's, you know, I don't have that challenge of like having to deal 24/7. So it's very much for me a come in, go out. And I do get the little best bits and stuff like that. So it keeps me energized and hopefully I inject as much energy for them as they do for me. So,
well, we all know that kids tend to react differently to someone else other than their parents, and especially their mothers.
Yes. Well, this is the thing, right?
Yeah.
And even just last week, that comment was made, like, I've told them this. Both the father and the mother independently said, well, I've told them this. I said, yes, but you're the parent. So there's a certain level of I'm not listening.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you're the parent. And they're very, I think the system has a little bit to answer for in that regard, and training them to not appreciate their parents' level of knowledge and skill. Like it seems to be with the way that the structures have developed that, you know, education of a child is outsourced. So you learn from a teacher. Your parents are not seen as teachers, even though for the first 5 years of your life, the most important teacher that you have is your parent. You know, that's when the little brains are a sponge and make all the rules and put everything in place in the brain. You know, that the parenting at those sort of 0 to 7 are just so crucial to what that person is going to be like in their adult life. And they are the teachers at that point, you know. And I think sometimes parents forget that they are the first teachers of their children. And even when it comes to being in the school system, you know, there's only so much that a teacher can impart in the time that they have access to a child in a group of anywhere from 12 to 30 or 50 in some countries.
Yeah.
And it is that role of the parent to help their child learn, not just about functional stuff, but about life and experience, and joy, and all those good meaty things.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, because I'm sure that you've got things that you need to do and places to go, people to see.
Yes, of course, but I could talk for hours.
I know,
on this stuff.
yeah, and I know that there'll be lots of people that'll be very interested in what you are doing, and I think that probably maybe even more so of recent times. But I do love the idea that you're kind of giving people that a different perspective, or children, or learners, let's say, it doesn't have to be children, a different perspective. And so that we can really, and we had just a very similar discussion the other night with a group of friends of mine. I've got a few friends that are teachers, that, you know, having that different life experience is so valuable, that sometimes there's things that we're learning that you aren't ever going to feel like you use again. And then kids do question that, well, why am I doing this? I'm never going to use it again. And it's hard to say, you know what, you're probably right.
Yeah. And I think the thing with that is, and this is something that's definitely in the system that needs, I think, addressing, but so many people don't cross-relate what they're teaching to life. It's seen as a subject to achieve a mark, and they forget that you need to cross-pollinate what you're doing in a way that the child at that developmental level can understand, so that they can take it beyond the classroom, not in a perfunctory way that is just to, oh, well, we've taught it, now you can go do it at home, like in a way that actually engages them to bring it into their life experience, you know, so that it helps them to learn. You know, I'm often often famous for talking about skateboard parks with teen boys, because that's the point at which physics, mathematics, and design concepts really come into play, especially if they're a skater. You know, how do you defy gravity when you're doing a 360 or an ollie or a whatever, you know? And it's looking at how it's exactly that thing, looking at how we position what they're learning, that they can actually bring it into part of their experience. And I think that's so important. And that's not just on teachers. That's, you know, as a parent, that's one of the strongest things that you can do, is have conversations around what your child is learning at school. Get them to talk to you with open-ended questions, you know, not just, oh, how was school, good, bad, you know, using that idea of asking them, hey, what was your top takeaway from school today? Or what was the best thing you did at school? A lot of the times, your answer that you will hear, lunch or recess. Well, why is that? Oh, I got to hang out with my friends. Core value of a child is, you know, wanting socialization, you know, or I got to play my game, or whatever it is, you know. Yeah. And having those conversations, really fostering in the home the idea that learning could have been at recess, it could have been in a subject, you know, there could have been a, you know, I usually go with, what was the top 3 things you did that you can remember today, because they have so much in a day that they're doing. So I ask them that. Then I ask them, you know, what's something that happened today that you didn't like or you'd like to change, you know, because this is all ways of questioning them, so that they're actually critically thinking about what has transpired in their own life in that day. And that's building a thinking skill that is really valuable.
Oh, fantastic. I love those takeaway questions. And I know a lot of parents are going to love that. A lot of mums out there with the top 3s. What do you do? So folks, let's thank Fiona for joining me. I'm really grateful you did. And
it's been fabulous.
I will get the link for your business, because I'm pretty sure that there'll be a lot of mums that'll be interested in how to access, or even teenagers, how to access this sort of learning space that you're creating for people. So I'll put that in the comments or description that we can put in there. Yep.
Getting that sorted at the moment. So For right now, it's through Facebook, but we're looking at other channels and setting up the website as well. So, like I said, we only just formalised it last week, so it's pretty fresh.
All right. Well, we'll put that Facebook link in, and then they'll be able to access the link as it's as it's growing and as they
evolving and growing. And yeah, I think that's the thing. It's learning, growth, and success is our byline.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. Learning, growth, and success.
Yeah.
Excellent, because sometimes we have to unlearn what we've already learned.
Don't I know it?
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me. For anyone else that's on here that hasn't heard about Discovery of Your True Self Facebook group, please join me in there and we can have some great chats and comments. I've got the kids coming home now, so they're going to be really noisy. So please like, share, subscribe, do all of that stuff that you can do on YouTube. And here they are, as you can hear. All right. Thanks so much, Fiona.
Thanks, Deb. It's been fabulous.
See ya.